For some strange reason, my social media feeds have been surfacing decades-old video clips of stories told by the late former president, Ronald Reagan. One such story, which was apparently one of his favorites, concerns twin boys, 5 or 6 years of age, whose parents are worried that their sons have developed extreme personalities. You see, one was a total pessimist. The other, a total optimist. So their parents took them along to a psychiatrist to try to cure them. First, the psychiatrist treated the pessimist. Trying to brighten his outlook, the psychiatrist took him to a room that was absolutely piled high, all the way to the ceiling, with brand new toys. But instead of yelping with delight, as the psychiatrist had expected, the little boy burst into tears. "What's the matter?" the psychiatrist asked, baffled. "Don't you want to play with the toys?" "Yes," the little boy bawled. "But if I do, I'll break them." Feeling a little defeated, the psychiatrist turned his energies to treating the optimist. In an attempt to dampen his outlook a little, the psychiatrist took him to another room, this one piled high to the ceiling with horse manure. But instead of wrinkling his nose in disgust, the optimist emitted a yelp of delight, climbed to the top of the pile, began gleefully digging out scoop after scoop with his hands. "What on earth are you doing?" the psychiatrist asked, just as baffled by the optimist as he had been by his brother, the pessimist. "With all this manure," the little boy replied, beaming, "there must be a pony in here somewhere." Well, friends, this past year that has come to a close has indeed seen an ever-growing pile of hot, piping bad news. Even those of us who run optimistic, those of us with sunnier dispositions have been finding it pretty tough to find any ponies in that pile. Over the past year, of course, that pile of bad news has included the grim fact that Israelis continue to face a multi-front war against Iran and its proxies, a war that is rapidly approaching the 2-year mark. And the pile includes the fact that international organizations continue to blame Israel for defending itself against barbaric terrorists who hide behind their own civilians and still refuse to release 48 hostages and vow to repeat their acts of terror time and time again if given the chance. And the pile includes the fact that several Western countries just this week, today, are rewarding these terrorists by recognizing a state that has no agreed-upon borders and in contravention of the Oslo peace accords. The pile includes the fact that here and around the world, we continue to see a rise in anti-Semitic rhetoric coming from the extreme left and the extreme right. We've seen rhetoric that has continued to spill into a surge of violence against Jews and Jewish institutions. And there's been a disturbing rise in attacks on public figures across the political spectrum. And the pile includes the fact that in many once stable democracies, fundamental assumptions about the rule of law, of free speech, the value of the sciences, and a commitment to human dignity have been seriously undermined. That sure is a big pile of bad news. You'd think somewhere in there'd be some ponies. Well, I don't know about ponies, but maybe there are glimpses of good news. Some of you know I returned just a couple of weeks ago from a trip to Israel, where even after all the trauma and in the face of the ongoing war, Israelis continue to live their lives. In fact, I was privileged to officiate at my cousin's wedding, overlooking the Mediterranean Sea in Jaffa, the southern tip of Tel Aviv. Such a joy to celebrate the beginning of the next chapter of our family's story. And couples are standing under the chuppah and smashing the glass all over the country. And there are children everywhere. Israel is one of those rare Western democracies that isn't facing a demographic decline because of a low birth rate. There are strollers and playgrounds everywhere. And there's construction too. It seems that high-rises and public transport infrastructure being built everywhere in the country. And of course, in Israel, in that place of noisy democracy, protest is robust. After all, Israelis are not known to be shy. And they're not shy about letting the government know what they think. And while some Israelis have been called up for hundreds of days of reserve duty, they continue to serve in high numbers when called, united behind the drive to defeat Hamas, bring home the hostages, and make sure that we aren't in this tragedy again in just a few years from now. Even though there are significant rifts in how exactly Israelis think they should go about achieving those aims. Since the start of the war, much has been achieved in dismantling Iran's terror proxies in Lebanon, in Syria, Yemen, and even in Gaza. And of course, over the summer, Iran's genocidal nuclear ambitions against Israel and much of the world were set back significantly, in large part thanks to the help of the U.S. Air Force. One of the most moving experiences I had in Israel was visiting the Kotel, the Western Wall in Jerusalem, when thousands of new IDF recruits were being sworn in. Young men and women, kids really, in uniform, Orthodox and secular, white, black, and Asian, Ashkenazi, Sephardi. They were there at Judaism's holiest site, pledging to defend the one and only Jewish state, to ensure that its future will be bright. But even with these glimmers of light, the fact is, there is a lot going on right now. And while we may have the sense that there must be ponies in there somewhere, that pile of nasty news is mighty high. Sometimes it can be hard to handle the relentless headlines and the fractured friendships and the family divisions that have emerged. Many of us, perhaps most of us, are exhausted, we're worried, we're appalled. And as we move through life, each day some of us may be more like that twin who tends towards pessimism as we become increasingly concerned and weighed down by all that's going wrong. Yet others of us, with those more naturally sunnier dispositions, may be convinced everything will indeed work out just fine, even if we can't find any ponies right now. Yet, friends, we do not have to look for those ponies, especially when there aren't any in that pile. And neither do we need to succumb to numbness and resignation or even cynicism in response to what's going on around us. Our tradition offers an ancient approach, a powerful middle ground between the pessimism of ponies that may come more naturally to some, but requires a leap of faith for others. It's a powerful approach, but it's also a simple approach. It's called hope, tikva. In Hebrew, tikva, hope, has two connotations. The first is as a thread linking one person to the next, one generation to the one that follows, a thread linking heaven and earth, a thread leading over time to a more perfect future. The second connotation is as a sacred pool, tikva, mikvah. Like a comforting pool, tikva, hope, provides us with the possibility of purification and regeneration. In fact, one of the very names of God is Mikvah Israel, which might be translated as the hope of Israel. Now, of course, hope is not the same as optimism. In fact, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory, in his book To Heal a Fractured World, drew important distinctions between these two phenomena when he wrote, "Optimism is the belief that the world is changing for the better. Hope is the belief that together we can make the world better." Hope is the belief. Optimism is a passive virtue. Hope is an active one. It needs no courage to be an optimist, but it takes a great deal of courage to hope. Sacks concludes by noting that the Hebrew Bible is not an optimistic book. It is, however, one of the great literatures of hope. Indeed, Sacks has articulated a profound truth. Hope has been a link and a wellspring, a kind of superpower that has sustained our people through the millennia. Hope was there in Abraham's journey to a new place he did not know, and in his fateful journey up the mountain in the binding of Isaac, about which we will read tomorrow morning. Hope was there in the Babylonian exiles who yearned to return. Hope was there in the early rabbis who witnessed the Roman destruction of Jerusalem and transformed Judaism into a portable faith that could be practiced wherever we dwelt. Hope was there in 1492 when the Jews of Spain started their lives anew throughout the Mediterranean. Hope was there in the immigrants who left everything they knew in Eastern Europe to venture to the New World. Hope was there in the remnant of our people who survived the camps and somehow began their lives again. And hope was there in those who dared to build, to declare, and to defend a Jewish state, so that we could finally be an Am Chofshi B'Artzeinu, a free people in our own land, as is sung in Israel's national anthem, which is, of course, called Hatikva, the hope. Friends, as we enter the year 5786, as Americans and as Jews, we cannot avoid the reality that we live in perilous, challenging times. Yet we know, in a sense, we have been here before. Regardless of our personal predilections, whether we naturally tend toward pessimism or optimism, we neither need to collapse in despair nor pursue honies where they simply do not exist. Instead, in this new year, we can strive to embrace that thread of hope that has linked us to all the generations through time. We can make the leaps of action into the well springs of Mikvah Yisrael, renewing our resolve through the hope of Israel. Together, may we help each other enter this new year reinvigorated with hope. Hope that together we can and we will make this a better year. A year of goodness, a year of sweetness, a year of health, and a year of peace for us, for all Israel, and for all the world. Amen.
Amen.